Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Monday, August 25th, 2025, and on Mondays we talk about mathematics and statistics. And the theme of the Dr. J Vlog series this week is perseverance. So yes, we're going to be talking about that from a somewhat mathematical or statistical standpoint. But I hope you find it interesting. So the idea today I want to talk about is this notion of forming habits. So performing an action for the first time, of course, is going to require planning, even if the plans are formed only moments before you start. But usually you've got to give it some planning, some thought, some preparation. What do you need? What are the resources? Some attention, etc. And then as behaviors are repeated on a consistent basis, what happens? We start to perform them a little bit more efficiently, with less thought, without having to worry so much about what it is exactly that we're doing. And then the environment in which we find ourselves will almost automatically cue a certain kind of response. And that's a habit. That's what we mean, basically. That's what the social psychologists are talking about. So it's what's a habit? It's something that you do habitually, regularly. Duh. In other words, without really having to think about it. So more formally, social psychologists argue that habits are acquired through this kind of incremental strengthening of our association between a situation, a cue, and an action, that is the repetition of a particular behavior. Kind of like when you walk into the bathroom just before you go to bed, if you're going to go to the washroom, you have to, whatever, then you'll almost automatically, at this point in your lives, hopefully, brush your teeth as well before you go to bed. And so doing this behavior, whatever the behavior is, on a regular basis, basically requires this active attention to a brief effort on a regular and consistent basis. And then what happens is that eventually we achieve this state of automaticity, okay? In other words, with which the behaviors performed automatically when the situation's encountered. So again, automaticity means that you essentially are doing the behaviors on autopilot, efficiently, often lacking awareness, even unintentionally. And it's just something you do. Again, like brushing your teeth, or it's like having a morning coffee, perhaps. Maybe that's one of your habits, or washing your hands after you go to the washroom, or putting on a seatbelt when you get in a car, and a million other things. So how long then does it take to form a habit? That's the question I want to address. It's an important question to ask, especially if you want to be realistic about doing something or maybe changing something in your life, presumably because you want to acquire healthier habits. Most of us would like to have healthier habits. We take an honest look at ourselves. Ever tried to form a new habit? It can be daunting, right? I tried to be a vegan once, okay, many years ago, and it was quite a struggle, partly because I hadn't prepared properly. I didn't know enough. And I think worst of all, there wasn't a lot of great vegan food around at that time. Like I remember once going into a restaurant and they had literally no vegan options. And the only thing I could have gotten was salad without dressing or raw vegetables. That was kind of disappointing, right? So anyway, I think it's easier to be a vegan these days, but that's a whole other story. I've often thought that whoever comes up with the really good tasting vegan food, there is some really good food out there now, and has it for a really cheap price, and then can sort of franchise that, kind of become the McDonald's of vegan food. I think they're going to get pretty rich at some point. So anyway, we're talking about math and stats today. So how long does it take then to form a new habit? So I was actually kind of interested in this topic quite some years ago, and I came across a cool article, the results of which, in part, I'm going to share with you today. So Philippa Lally and her colleagues in the UK did a study some years ago of about 100 people where they tracked their efforts to develop a habit relating either to food, eating habits, or drinking habits, meaning water, not the other kinds, or exercise. And they track them over a period of 12 weeks. And they use something called the self-reporting habit index. Okay, so to form a habit, you'd think that basically all you have to do is just practice doing that thing for a fixed period of time each day until you reach the point where you do without thinking automatically. It's a habit. And that's kind of how we usually think of most habits, but it's actually slightly different. And I'm going to show you how. There, okay? So, and I've created this little habit formation curve. And so actually what happens is that there's the relationship between repetition and habit strength, as you can see there in the little diagram, follows an asymptotic curve in which you automatically, your automaticity, I should say, increases steadily, but by a smaller amount with each repetition, okay, until it reaches an asymptote. That is that leveling, that plateau. It levels off as such. Okay, and at that point, you've basically locked in on whatever it is that you have to do or whatever you're trying to do. And so based on the study, what they were trying to figure out then was how long did it take for people to form the new habits? And as you can imagine, there was quite a range. And so some people locked in pretty quickly with their new habits, and it took longer for some. And that's kind of what we would expect in a normal population, a normal distribution, if you will. And so for each person, this is the kind of the methodology. They had to decide and focus on just one specific new habit that met the following criteria. It was a behavior that had to be something that they didn't already do, that could be performed in response to a regular daily event or cue, and that you had to have that cue occur every single day and once a day. So the examples were things like eating a piece of fruit with lunch. So every day you had lunch, that would be the cue. Did you eat a piece of fruit to go along with that? Drinking a bottle of water every day with lunch. Again, remember, these are people who'd never done this before, so you had to start from scratch, so to speak. Or running for 15 minutes before dinner. So again, you could choose, but the participants were then asked to carry out that behavior every day for 84 days and then see what happened. And so what did happen? Well, for every behavior studied, okay, again, whether you're talking about the eating behavior, the drinking behavior, or the exercise behavior, and these were all measured separately, right, for each individual, they modeled the time to plateau as being, let me show you here, about 66 days, okay? So especially look at the one on the right there, if you can see that. And so that was a really good one. It really fit the pattern almost perfectly. And so that's walking for 10 minutes after breakfast. 13 people, I think, did that particular or tried to develop that particular habit. And you see that asymptotic curve there, and then the plateau, and it levels out. Okay. So again, what they found is that for each of the different behaviors, and it really didn't matter which one, they found that it took about 66 days to plateau on average. But at the same time, there was considerable range. It ranged from a low of 18 days and then as high as 254 days. So on average then, again, there's a fair bit of variability. Again, think of the normal curve, the normal distribution, but 95% of the people reached that plateau within 66 days, okay? And then the thing is that what they found is that early repetitions had a greater impact. So if you started more and started doing more earlier on, then you would, you'd reach that plateau a little bit more quickly. You could miss once in a while, and that didn't really adversely affect your score, your ability to habituate, as it were. If you missed regularly, well, of course, then it's a completely different story. And so there's a point at which basically the behaviors become automatic, that you don't really have to think about it anymore, and you don't have to keep repeating them. They become a part of your quote-unquote normal routine. So the point of this, too, then, is that it's possible then to form new habits, but it requires, you guessed it, perseverance. And so for many of us, we can actually form new habits in a reasonably short period of time. Usually within, again, by this kind of research, and it depends on the nature of the habit, but usually within about 2 to 3 months. And so I think that's doable for most folks. In fact, the research shows that the bigger challenge is getting started on the new habit. That's the first hurdle, the new behavior, whatever that might be. It's like my efforts to start running again. I used to run, and then my knees messed up, whatever, and I got into the habit of doing the elliptical in the gym. So I gave up running altogether. I didn't have much of an interest in it anymore, for that matter. So I go to the gym and I do my elliptical, my cardiovascular, 60 minutes, 70, 90 minutes. I got used to that, no problem. But then I had this idea, as many of you know, of dribbling across Canada. So then I thought, I got to start running again. And man, that was hard. The hardest thing was just getting started, shifting the mindset to get out there and go for the first run. And then gradually repeating the process each day. And then, of course, dealing with the soreness, the time constraints, and so on. And then gradually building up. But as with anything, I was able to persevere, and I'm, well into the training. Okay, so let's go back to the different mode here. There we go. Okay, so then the next question becomes, how do you make that habit stick then? Can it become a permanent habit? And yes, of course. But then again, that does require perseverance. And what helps with making the habit stick? Having a goal or a purpose in mind. Okay? So again, real life example. If you were watching yesterday's vlog, I hinted at the possibility that sometimes all of us, myself included, just want to give up and say, what's the point? Okay? And I'm fortunate in that that doesn't happen to me very often. But it did happen a few months back. I've been working on my terrorism book on and off for the last couple of years. And I was having a hard time getting it done, right? The publisher was asking me as well. So I was feeling that pressure. But then a part of me thought, hey, Dr. J, it's not like you're coming up with a cure for cancer. Who cares if you just drop the book, right? Heck, you could even retire. You don't even have to write another article or book the rest of your life if you want. The thing is I devoted so many hours to studying and researching and teaching about terrorism. And the book would be sort of a nice way then to summarize what I know and what I had to say about the subject. And that relates then to something we call expertise. So you've probably heard that or read about, or, if you want to become beyond a habit, if you want to become an expert at something, there's this adage that it takes 10,000 hours. I think that's from the old Malcolm Gladwell book and that, whatever, that to become an expert. And, now that's been debunked to some extent, but it certainly does take a long time for most of us. Okay. And the point of being an expert is that there are other aspects that are required. If beyond this notion of 10,000 hours, yes, it's going to take time, but it's really more about the quality of your practice, if you will, and the consistency of those hours that you put into developing your expertise. That's what makes the difference. Okay. So in short, if we want to be an expert, whatever the field, whatever the skill, we're going to have to persevere, but in a highly specific way. Commit to regularly doing the thing that we're interested in for a minimum amount of time, typically on an everyday basis. And then we have to follow a plan and be focused in our training. It has to be high quality training and so on. And so, again, that's the part that I think requires the most perseverance. And it's easier to persevere when you love something that you're doing or you find it deeply meaningful or rewarding. And so that's how I decided to approach the book. I formed a habit first. I decided what I do is go into the office literally first thing every single day of the week. This is just the Dr. J way of thinking about things. And I do it first thing in the morning. And so this started about 6 months ago, and literally 7 days a week, I would go in. I missed 1 or 2 days here and there, but I can't even remember the last one I missed, but I'm sure I did. But the point is I'd go in every single day, first thing in the morning, and I would just work as long as I could stay focused on the book. On some days, that was just maybe an hour, and that was it. I was spent or I didn't have anything, whatever. Sometimes 2 or 3 hours, that was more commonly the case, sometimes even more. And then when I could no longer focus, I'd leave, and then I'd usually go home. And then I'd do other stuff. I'd attend to other work because I did have other things I had to do for my job. I do these vlogs, maybe something around the house, go for a workout, whatever. And then if I had an inspiration later in the day, at some point, I'd come back and maybe do some more work on the book. But again, I didn't put pressure to do that. I didn't set a time limit. It might be 20 or 30 minutes, whatever, here or there. And sometimes I didn't get back to the book, knowing that I'd get up first thing in the morning and tackle whatever chunk I could tackle, whatever I had the energy for, whatever I had the creativity for, and so on. And so again, as I mentioned, I started that process about 6 months ago. And here's the good news. As of literally today, and as of the posting of this vlog, which is closer to 6 p.m. today rather than 6 a.m. as I try to get them up every day, right? But here's the point. I finished the book today. It's my little brag. I totally finished. It's actually done. And I'm just waiting back to hear back now from the publisher in terms of how they want me to submit the 10 chapters that I've written, the 45 pages of reference, and the nearly 400 pages in total. Now, again, I don't know how it's going to translate when it's typeset, etc. But nonetheless, now, is it a great book on terrorism, the best ever? No, it's not. Well, it's good. It's solid, but it's not the best thing I've ever done. And that's okay, because it is done, and it is going to get published, hopefully by this fall. I'll let you know. And I'm happy with the results. It's a great feeling of accomplishment, I guess, no matter what field we're in, when you feel like you've finished the job that you've done, you've finished building the deck, whatever it is, right? And you, especially if you feel like you've done a good job, or if not a great job. It's kind of like the McCartney song, right? Remember from Live and Let Die? When you got a job to do, you got to do it well. So I did the best I could, and I know it's not going to shake up the academic world or win a Nobel Prize and whatever, but it's a solid, and let me put it this way, a B+ contribution. That's my honest opinion. No, it's not an A, but I do think it's a B+. But the best part is now I want to get on and do something else, and I want to get an A on my next project, whatever that might be, no matter what. It starts, though, with developing habits, making the plan, and then persevering. It's kind of like this vlog series. This is my 233rd consecutive day of posting a new vlog online. That's right, one a day for 233 consecutive days. I haven't missed a day. It's become a habit. Are they all A's, by the way? Of course not. And it's kind of like I tell my players, when I be coaching and so on, I say things something like, well, you're going to play 30 games, basketball games this season, and you'd love to have a great game every time out, right? Who wouldn't? But in fact, only one will be your best game of the year, the best of those 30 games. And at the other end of the continuum, there's one that's going to be your worst. And then, of course, what happens? Most of the rest of them will be kind of regress to some kind of statistical mean. They'll be kind of your average game. This is typically how you perform. This is how many points and rebounds you get, typically how many minutes you play, how many turnovers you have, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's different ways to measure the performance of your game, but you see the point. Only one can be your very best by some metric, and one's going to be the worst. Everything else is going to fall in between on that normal curve, and you're going to somewhere, regress to some kind of mean, or this is typically how you perform. Again, it doesn't really matter what it is. Okay, and that's kind of the way life is, if you think about it. Think about just every day. Some days are great, amazing. And some days, well, they kind of suck, don't they? Good days, bad days. And most, of course, are going to regress to some kind of average day. How was it today? Oh, it was an average day. Okay? And so here's the final and key, that sounds bad, though, doesn't it? Oh, it's just an average day. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And so this is my final little piece of advice. You don't have to be great every time out. Obviously, that's, again, basically and statistically impossible. But with hard work and perseverance, what can you do? You can raise your average. Okay? And I say this in all honesty. My average day these days is much higher than it used to be. My batting average, if you will, metaphorically, on how my average day is way up compared to what it was 10 or 20 years ago. And that's my point. You can raise your average too. Your average day can get better and better. Happens all the time. It's kind of like grades in university. Some of you have been to university. Almost everyone does better when? Not their first year. They usually get better after that. Their averages go up in time. So that's the point. Try to raise your average no matter what you're doing. It's kind of like my marriage to my wife of 17 years. We've actually been together 19 years. But I'd say that the average day in our marriage today, or these days, is higher. It's better. It's at a higher average than ever before. And I like to think that my wife, I hope, would say the same thing. I'm pretty sure she would. Okay? Conversely, if you're in a slump, and who hasn't been in a slump, and your average is going down, well, then take a good, hard look and see what's going on, what's happening. Figure out why, and then try to improve on that average. And listen, last piece of advice: you better do that before you get traded, or end up getting traded to a new team. All right, as ever, I hope you enjoyed this. May you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And hopefully I can sleep in tomorrow and not get up first thing in the morning and get into work, because I'm finished with the book. All right, so get her done. See you tomorrow.